Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. This time, the Wheel of Jobs decided that we play Pictomancer on a Monday evening, and this set had a pretty heavy emphasis on 8-man content. For Duty 1, we went to Yuweyawata Field Station, and I could definitely feel it had been a bit since I did a proper dungeon as Pictomancer. That said, for some general advice for playing Pictomancer, especially in dungeons, is to remember to always do your best to use your muses before pull ends. And conversely, not waste time painting a motif if you aren't certain you will use it in that particular fight, as you can paint it for free after the battle. In the case of the muses themselves, it should come as no surprise that Starry Muse is always worth painting. Just make sure it will be used again in the specific fight if you spend time painting it mid-fight. For Living Muse, it is worth keeping in mind that the Living Muse itself is actually weaker than your filler combo and only makes up the power difference with the Mark of the Ages and Retribution of the Madine payoffs on every second use. Which means that if you're going to paint a Living Muse mid-fight, it should be with the intent of reaching an even number of them for that payoff. At some point, not necessarily in that specific fight in a dungeon. This is even more impactful when you can put them in the Starry Muse window. For Striking Muse, while yes, in an optimized striking dummy scenario, the odd-minute hammer is considered a relatively small damage loss over doing filler, doing something is always better than doing nothing, so if the mobility offered by the hammer helps you, fantastic! Furthermore, Hammer Stamp scales decently well with AoE. For a couple tips for the last boss in regards to Pictomancer is first to make sure to place Starry Muse under the boss if you're going to use it right at the start, as the boss will lead with a half-room cleaving attack that might just point at you otherwise. The second tip is if the cooldown happens to line up with this, that if you put down Starry Muse on the southern end of the arena right when the boss starts casting Crater Carve, then you will easily be able to take your 20 seconds of Starry Muse there without being messed with. The fact the next mechanic afterwards is the proximity AoE also means even if you don't have Starry Muse coming up there, standing on the opposite end is still a good idea, although just remember you might actually need a hammer here. One last thing to keep in mind for this fight is that after the circling AoEs finish, the boss will cleave most of the arena, so don't be too quick to put down Starry Muse again if you have it. Then spread markers will happen, which can be difficult to position for. Our Black Mage here was very aware and noticed my spacing issues and moved for me. Right after that is a stack marker, so if you do put down Starry Muse here, try to make sure you can reach it from near melee range. Now, this duty went great with solid players. For Duty 2, we went to Titan Extreme, and the Black Mage from before was here too. And also Nixia the Machinist knew me. Hello! The style of this fight is really scary if the group has problems, because a lot of it really boils down to just dodge Lamau, so it might be difficult to even give advice for it. Case in point, we had a few wipes here. On the first pull, half the raid died to a knockback, which, while possibly recoverable, just wasn't possible when it snuck up on us like that. For the second pull, our Sprout tank suddenly went for it while we were waiting for a replacement. While this could possibly be beaten with just one tank, that would probably require everyone to know what to do. This time, we wipe out after another knockback while Titan is smack dab in the center. Optimally, drag Titan to the edge. For the third pull, we have a replacement tank, but still run into trouble due to knockback shenanigans. On the fourth pull, we have some minor issues with the ads dying at an awkward spot, on top of the previously mentioned knockback issues. You see where I'm going with this? On the fifth pull, specifically both of our healers die at the same time, wiping us. Then, on the sixth pull, we finally have no one die to knockbacks, and our Sprout tank learned how to deal with the ads. And despite a pair of jails spawning too closely, and other minor issues and a few deaths, we finally do make it to the end. Well done, everyone. A key thing to remember about the jails is that if there is a tether between the two players, it means they're too close, and if they don't spread further, both jails will get a defense boost. It will be possible to still deal with it, but it will be much harder. Sometimes you may need to move further than you'd like to make that happen, but you know, use your eyes. It matters where the ads die because they leave a rather large puddle when they do, which does damage and slows you down. So if they are at a very inconvenient spot, it may be difficult to dodge mechanics. Finally, if you are the off tank, keep an eye on your co-tank in case a tank switch is in order. For Duty 3, we went to Shiva Extreme, and Taldemar is here. As some players were watching cutscenes, I offered to explain the fight. One tank was interested, but the other was pushing at the wall to get started, and did in fact pull immediately once it was possible, so no tactics overview. Now, the amazing comedy in that is that the first mechanic Shiva leads with, at least half the time, is bringing out her sword and shield, which on hard is a tank buster, but on extreme is a cone stack. So our excited tank just folds right then. The second time the sword comes out, during the ad phase, a lot of us were just generally better at moving into place to help with the stack, making it survivable. Fun fact, the cone stack ignores damage reduction and invulnerabilities. During the ad phase, one of our healers suddenly go down, but aside from that, the phase goes over reasonably well. In phase 2, my first tip is that when she summons the first wave of circle AoEs, those 4 circles are placed where the safe spots will be for the second wave. Depending on what weapon Shiva will pull out, how you coordinate your safe spots can vary. If she brings out the staff, you need to send at most 2 players to each quadrant, preferably, as there's just enough space for 2 players spaced out enough to not overlap their spread markers, assuming they both get one. If she instead brings out the sword, the whole raid optimally goes to the same quadrant to take the stack. As I recall, she always opens phase 2 with the staff, so it should basically never come up that it could be sword. Next, when she brings out her bow, remember to get behind her, even if you can survive it as a tank. When she starts out attacking with a bow, keep your eyes peeled for who gets the blue marker. Get out of the way of that player, and if it is you, use your knockback immunity. Shiva shoots a knockback line at that player. If Shiva's pulled completely out to the edge and you get up close to her, it is possible to take the knockback without hitting the edge on the opposite side. In this group though, 3 players got frozen as a result. One of them died. I feel like I have in the past had wipes on this fight over something similar, but because none of the tanks or healers got caught up in it, it was manageable. And we promptly won the first try. Well done, team. For Duty 4, we went to Sunshine and Paw. Take note that at this level, Pom Muse is so weak that Fire in Red, straight Fire in Red as is, beats it in potency. So optimally, use the free Pom Muse you start with, paint up Winged motif, and then use it and Monk of the Ages. After that point, the fight would need to last long enough for another Winged motif for it to be worth it to do it again. For Duty 5, we went to Teasing the Darkness, and here my best suggestion is to at least hold Winged Muse and Monk of the Ages until some ads have spawned. You could also do the same with the Pom Muse, as the second Pom Muse, if it comes up, is probably not worth using. Remember, the fight ends once everything is dead, so Fire 2 in Red may be worth it if the boss is taking enough damage from other players. For Duty 6, we went to P6N, Hegemone, with Taldemar. During the spinning cone AoE section, I get hit, extremely ironically while I was painting a hammer, due to realizing the need for the mobility it offers. In retrospect, at that moment, simply casting Holy in White and running would have been optimal. The fact getting hit almost certainly means you will be stunned for 6 seconds a moment later really means that avoiding being hit at any cost is better than the alternative. Another thing that got me slightly confused was the realization that I didn't have Rainbow Drip to finish off my bursts with, which occurred to me during the burst. For Duty 7, we went to O2N, Catastrophe. The main thing about this fight is the anti-gravity button, which needs to be used at various times. It can also be confusing with certain mechanics that overlap, but strike above or on the ground separately, so finding out where the quote-unquote safe spot really is can be hard. The boss also has a gaze mechanic that can end up chain petrifying you for a rather long time. A last tip for the fight itself is that there are these pool noodles it spawns. The ones that stop wiggling are the safe ones. For Pictomancer related advice, the supposed damage loss from using Striking Muse on cooldown is comparable to how at level 90 plus Holy and White is only good for movement and is considered a loss to use just for the sake of it. The Holy and White part is caused by the existence of Comet in Black, making the filler combo sequence without counting Holy and White superior, essentially. In a similar fashion, by lacking Comet in Black at 70, Hammer Stamp looks a lot better by comparison, which is why I'm using it on cooldown here, without having done the overarching, more mathy parts of figuring out whether it actually is optimal to do so. Just keep that in mind. For duty 8 we went to P1N, Erichthonios, and I was reminded of a lesson I learned on a Black Mage Mentor set a while back. If you can, then place your initial Starry Muse on Erichthonios, so you can easily dodge the initial half-room cleaves in any direction. This is mainly necessary in case your tanks decide to get funky with the angle of the boss. Of course, if you're a bit smart with your initial hammer combo, you can use that to cover while you dodge the cleave if needed. Another interesting thing that comes up in this fight is that Erichthonios can be beaten in just about 4 minutes. Which means that Starry Muse was coming off cooldown just about as the fight was ending anyway. I don't think it was actually optimal to paint Starry Motif at this time, and even just doing filler combos for the end would have been superior, since we didn't get that much time with Starry Muse anyway. Again, circling back to the original advice of don't paint something if you don't know if you'll use it. 2 fun facts about Erichthonios. 1. Whenever the Moogle Treasure Trove has featured him as an option for Mog Tomes, he has been a decent option to farm the Mog Tomes, as a fully optimized team tends to beat him in under 3 minutes. 2. When the fight was current, all tanks, except Dark Knight if memory serves, were capable of soloing the fight, and the limiting factor was the duty timer mainly. For duty 9, we went to Garuda hard. For Pictomancer, the most optimal thing you can probably do is try to always make sure you have one motif available to paint if you can, as Garuda will either leave the arena or straight up be invulnerable about 3 or 4 times throughout the fight. On top of that, I'm pretty sure this is a time-based phase change, but in the event that it is HP threshold based, it could also be handy to hold a Winged Muse for when Garuda summons her ads, to push Garuda past that point to death, as sometimes groups have had minor issues pushing through the free healing she gets from one of her ads. Ultimately, most of the time it is probably better to just use the cooldowns as you get them. Just remember, Pom Muse with no follow-up Winged Muse and Monk of the Ages is not worth using most of the time. And finally for duty 10, we went to A9N, Refurbisher 0, with Taldemar. And Nixia the Machinist is also here, and also Judicale the Warrior knew me. Hello! For normal, this is the kind of fight that you just are not going to overcome if you don't know what to do. On our first pull, we suddenly wipe because the Full Metal Faust is allowed to go alive in the lava. So let's talk about strategy, as many players simply have no idea. Every time the boss brings down robot scrap on the field alongside power generators, have a tank, preferably the off-tank, grab power generators and place them near any robots that are not on the quadrant that is going to drop into the lava. The generator will cause any hit robots to fixate the player that placed them, so while a DPS or even healer might be able to live it, it is much preferred to have a tank do it. Then simply kill the robots so they die on that quadrant, and get away. Any robots that start on the correct platform can be ignored, and the power generators can simply be ignored entirely when you don't need them anymore. Whenever the boss casts Scrap Burst, hiding behind these scrap mounds will protect you. Then, at some point, the Full Metal Faust will drop down, which also causes a sequence of every quadrant to drop one by one. If the Faust drops in while alive, you wipe immediately. If the Faust is consumed by Refurbisher 0 due to not being killed and dropped in time, you wipe. However, the quadrants will drop in the order of northwest, northeast, southwest, southeast, and the southeast quadrant drops a second or two before the boss actually finishes attempting to consume the Faust. The only advantage inherent in killing the Faust on an earlier platform than southeast is that the boss is nigh unkillable as long as the Faust is on the field, dead or alive. So optimally, the off-tank picks up the Faust, moves it to either the southwest or southeast quadrant, and everyone kills it there. If it is on the southwest quadrant and it seems to get sketchy, just move it to the southeast one. Once the Faust leaves the field, pop any remaining cooldowns you may have held and push the boss to the finish. Notably, if you fail to drop the other robots in the lava, it is not necessarily an instant wipe, however, it does make Refurbisher stronger, so you don't want that. A rather interesting set of duties, including one of the hardest normal raids in the game, as well as 2 extremes, with one that really required a bit of teaching. This also denotes the 50th Mentor Roulette set I've done in Dawntrail specifically, and we're still only about 3/8 of the way there for the achievement. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, when Pictomancer's toolkit was initially revealed before Dawntrail, Rainbow Drip's potency and damage drop-off was at such a point where players immediately determined that Rainbow Drip into Holy and White spam was actually optimal for AoE. By the time Dawntrail released for real, the secondary target damage of Rainbow Drip was more than cut in half, just to make sure we wouldn't do that. Talk about a cursed AoE rotation, am I right?